Okay. And good evening. This is Deacon Joseph Sweden.
This is Bishop Enoch.
And we're doing a book review on St Gregory of Tours' Vita Patrum. And this is from the collection Translated Text for Historians. I know we talked about the series a little bit last time we did this, but if you want to just go through really quickly, what exactly is this series?
They are translations of materials from late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. There's about 90 volumes. They are, just like they said, translated text for historians. But even if you're not a professional historian, you can still profit from them. And if you're an Orthodox Christian, you can profit from the vast majority of them, because most of them come from first millennial Christian sources.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good stuff there, like the Liber Pontificalis, the early medieval Spain. Okay. All right.
So the Vita Patrum, it was written by St Gregory of Tours. St Gregory of Tours was the Bishop of Tours. He was born, I think, in around 535. He died in 595. He was from an old Gallo-Roman senatorial family. So he had an uncle who was a saint. He had other people in his family who were bishops and saints. He was well connected with the various hermits, elders, sainted bishops, and other clergy and holy laity throughout Gaul. He knew the various different kings, Frankish kings at the time, from the Merovingian dynasties, and he wrote a number of works. One is called the Vita Patrum, which means life of the fathers, and it addresses the lives of about 20 saints. We're not going to go through the entire book, obviously, since this is just a book review. Now, famously, Father Seraphim Rose had made a translation of this text, but he did it from a French translation that was already in existence. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I should only make a note that the preface of this book by the translator says this is the first translation into English of the Vita Patrum. It would be the first translation into English directly from the Latin text. So that's the background of it. Some of the saints mentioned in it, like Saint Romanus and Lupicinus, and I think maybe Saint Quintian and Saint Gallus, and St. Gregory of Lagrange. They actually have there are other surviving manuscripts which have expanded lives. I mean, not like expanded in the sense they have more material. Because St. Gregory might not go more than like 10 pages at most, since he's the whole text of the book that contains the lives of the saints is about, let's see, it's only about 90 pages for 20 saints. So
it's 3 or 4 pages of the saint, basically.
Yeah,
4 to 5
some
pages,
of them can be a few. It's like St. Gregory of Lagrange can be more, because St. Gregory of Lagrange was a relative of St. Gregory of Tours. Or so if they're relatives of him, or he's quite familiar with them and such. So the book is basically about their lives. And before I start going into particular examples, do you have any comments, Father Joseph?
Well, I thought that what was interesting is at the beginning of the text, it does include useful resources for the historical reader. Not only does it include the entire family background of St. Gregory of Tours, it also includes like maps of the area. It has a lot of good references. I thought it was one thing that I thought was very interesting in the footnotes in the first set of lives that were there, the lives of what was it, Lupicinus and Romanus. It was actually the footnotes actually can lead you to where these places are today. Yes. So like San Lupicin is it's a full-size city now, and it notes the old not cathedral, but the old monastery that was eventually rebuilt later. So it's kind of just cool. You're walking through history with it.
Yep. Offhand, I believe some of the bodies of these saints were destroyed either in the Reformation or in the French Revolution. Remember, Saint Irenaeus' body was destroyed by the Huguenots,
Right.
and then in the revolution, the revolutionaries destroyed, in a precursor almost of the Bolshevik terror, the bodies of a good deal of saints. So let me read real quick the preface Saint Gregory gives. It's only 3 paragraphs, but I think that can set us up to talking about the rest of the book. It says, "Here begins the book of the life of the fathers, the work of Georgius Florentius Gregorius of Tours." And here are I'm just going to give real quick the names of the 20 saints. So there's Saints Romanus and Lupicinus under one heading. That's the abbot. Saint Elidius the bishop, Saint Abraham the bishop, the abbot, Saint Quincianus the bishop, Saint Porcianus the abbot, Saint Gallus the bishop, Saint Gregory the bishop, Saint Nikidius, bishop of Lyon, Saint Patroclus, Saint Freoridus, Saint Calupa, Saint Emilianus, Saints Emilianus and Bracco, who were abbots, Saint Lupicinus the recluse, Saint Marcius an abbot, Saint Sinoch an abbot, Saint Venatius an abbot, Saint Nikidius, who is bishop of Trevere, Saints Ursus and Leobatius the abbot, Saint Monagunus a nun, and Saint Labardus a recluse. So Saint Gregory then says, "I had decided to write only about what had been achieved with divine help at the tombs of the blessed martyrs and confessors. But I have recently discovered information about those who have been raised to heaven for the merit of their blessed conduct here below. And I thought that their way of life, which is known to us through reliable sources, could strengthen the church. Since the occasion presented itself, therefore, I did not want to postpone the relation of some of these things, because the life of the saints not only makes their aims clear, but also encourages the minds of listeners to follow their example. Some people have asked us whether we should say the Vita, life, or the Vitae, lives of the saints. Agellius, who is an ancient Latin grammarian, and several other philosophers have said Vitae, or lives. But the writer Pliny, in the 3rd book of the Art of Grammar, says the ancients have said the lives of each of us. Grammarians did not believe that the word vita has a plural, from which it is clear that it is better to speak of the life of the fathers rather than the lives of the fathers. The more so since there is a diversity of merits and virtues among them, but the one life of the body sustains them all in this world. I have indeed related more briefly some facts about the life of some of these men in my book on the confessors, which we'll get to later in another program below. Things which may be reckoned great by the power of God or made small by my writing, but in this present work, which we have decided to call the life of the saints, we have presumed, despite our inexperience and ignorance, to speak of these things at greater length, praying to the Lord that he may put in our mouth, as he has often rendered speech to the dumb, so that my lips may utter things salutary to my hearers and readers and worthy of the Holy Fathers, and the things which he instructs me to write on the saints, may he regard them as sung in his own praise." So St. Gregory gives a brief outline there. He addresses not only miracles and events that happen in the life while the saints have their earthly ministry, but he also deals with miracles that happen at their tomb, or sometimes even at their own funerals. Because the concept is that God doesn't just stop working in the saints when they die. All right, their earthly life ends. He continues through their relics, and this is in fact where you have ancient Latin patristic hymns like Iste Confessor. Which talk about miracles, people fleeing to the tombs of the saints, asking God and the saint for help, and miracles being distributed there to the faithful and such. Someone who reads this text can, in some cases, be a little shocked, because let me give you an example. I mean, I don't think it's shocked in a bad way, but shocked in a way that we don't think of. Not all the saints here, I mean, they don't present themselves necessarily in the very how do you say, almost namby-pamby way we think of, that we're taught to think of a saint. All right. For example, I think it's Saint Nikidius.
They show their human faults.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily their faults. Let me give you an example.
Their methodology.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. All right, that I thought, I guess you could say is kind of humorous, depending on your perspective. Okay, all right. So Saint Nikitas of Lyon, who was the Bishop of Lyon, he succeeded. I'm sorry, Saint. He would actually Saint Gregory of Lagrange, I believe. Okay. He was the relative of Saint Gregory. Okay. All right. So. Okay. I can't find it at the moment, but it was either Saint Gregory of Lagrange or Saint Nikitas. Anyway, someone had committed some offense at his tomb. All right.
Okay.
And the saint appears to him with Saint Justice, and I'm trying to find it. I'm going through the text right now, and the saint says, "Why did you do this? This was not acceptable." And he punches him in the throat. Now, of course, this is after the saint has already reposed. That's actually that's what the saint did. He got upset. He reappeared from heaven and got upset and punched this man in the throat, and then began to hit him and say, "You have to stop." And the man repented after this happened. So that's oftentimes not how we imagine an apparition of the vision, a real manifestation of a saint to transpire. All right, but I suppose sometimes, just like Saint Nicholas slapped Arius in the face, which I'm not saying for us to go around slapping people in the face.
There's a lot, you do find more. The more lives of saints and fathers you read, there are a lot of slaps. They're not it's not all over the place, but it is common.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, Saint Paul says a bishop must not be a striker. All right, so obviously
Right.
it's not a normative thing to transpire and such.
Yeah, I wasn't implying like.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah. I understand.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can find the text real quick. It might not. Saint Nikitas. Okay, here. I don't have my computer set up properly for my notes. So, okay, so I'm going to give you another example from the life of Saint Nikitas of Lyons.
Okay.
So this is before he reposed. Okay. This is one morning, Saint Nikitas got up from matins, and after observing 2 antiphons, he went into the sanctuary, where as soon as he sat down, a deacon intoned the response. And the bishop was angry, saying, "Let him be quiet, let him be quiet. May the enemy of justice not be so bold as to sing." Scarcely have these words been uttered than the deacon found that his mouth was stopped up, and he was silent. The holy man, Saint Nikitas, ordered him to be called and said, "Have I not said that you must not enter the church of God? Why have you so rashly presumed to enter? And why have you dared to sing the sacred chants?" And all those present were astonished, knowing nothing evil of the deacon. But then the demon who possessed him began to cry out and say that the holy man was putting him to great torments. He had indeed dared to sing, that is, the demon had dared to sing in the church. His voice had not been recognized by the people, although it had been recognized by the holy man, who by his harsh words condemned not the deacon, but rather the demon. The holy man placed his hand on the deacon and chased out the demon and brought him back to his senses. So anyway, that's an example of the saints, an example of how St. Gregory points out in the life of St. Nikitas, the saints can see things through the grace of God that we can't see. All right. And this will be repeated. Various fathers will see, things about priests, bishops, kings, laity, that we don't necessarily recognize. All right. So, okay, here's the story. Here's the other account. Okay. It says, when the period fixed by Roman law before a dead person's will would be read out in public had come to an end. Okay, so here's the background. Okay. After having been made known, this is St. Nikitas of Lyons, who the Bishop Metropolitan of Lyons, who I'm only going to give a few examples because obviously we can't go 2 hours of going through the entire text.
Yeah.
My idea is to get people interested in reading the Vita Patrum. All right. So after having been made known to people by these and other signs, he, St. Nikitas of Lyon, passed to Christ in the 22nd year of his episcopate and in the 60th year of his age. While he was being carried to his burial, a blind man entreated to be placed under the bier, and immediately he was put. He that was put there recovered the sight that he had lost long before. So another miracle. The divine goodness did not long delay in glorifying by miracles the blessed remains of him who saw it was already receiving among the stars in the midst of the angelic choirs. Okay, here we go. When the period fixed by Roman law before a dead person's will could be read out in public had come to an end, the testament of this pontiff was brought to the forum where, before the crowds of the people, it was opened and read out by the judge. Then a priest of the basilica swelled with rage because the saint had left nothing to that church in which he was buried. And he said, so the angry priest said, many people used to say that Nikidius was insensitive. It can now, this is page 55 if you can get there.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. Then many people used to say that Nikidius was insensitive. It can now clearly be seen, since he has left nothing to the church in which he was buried. But the following night he appeared in shining robes to the priest, accompanied by 2 bishops, Justus and Eucharius. And Justus was Bishop of Lyons, who was president of the Council of Aquileia, and then there was St. Eucharius, who was also there. Okay. To whom he said, so St. Nikidius says to the, appears from paradise, and he talks to this priest, and he says the following. This priest, he's talking to St. Justus and Eucharius in the presence of this priest. He says, this priest, my very holy brothers, covered me with blasphemies when he said that I had left nothing to this temple in which I rest. He does not realize that I have left there the most precious thing I have, the dust of my body. And they replied, it is indeed wicked to disparage a servant of God. And the holy man, Nikidius, returned to the priest and hit him on the throat with his fists and hands, saying, sinner, you ought to be crushed underfoot. Cease your stupid mutterings. The priest woke up with a swollen throat, which was so painful that he could swallow his saliva only with great difficulty. He had to stay in bed for 40 days in considerable pain. But having called on the name of the confessor, he was restored to health, and never again dared to prate such words as he had earlier presumed to do. All right? So, it's an example that in a real way, in true real way, when you attack the saints, even if you don't realize it, there can be very deleterious repercussions. It's a blasphemy against God, in other words,
right?
To attack the saints. And God, although the Lord is patient, and the saints, the Lord in the saints is patient, that doesn't necessarily mean that patience is always going to manifest in I hate to use the word, like non-violent ways.
Yeah.
And simply because, now look, this man in the dream he had, Saint Nikidius basically began to punch him in the throat. So he wakes up with a sore throat. He realizes what he did. He essentially suffers for a period of time. It calls on the confessor, and he's healed. All right. So that's just an example of from the lives of the saints. And we can address a few other things. I think. What time are we at, Father Joseph?
We're at 8:20.
Okay, well, not much more. So a few more things from the life of Saints Lupicinus and Romanus the abbots who were brothers.
He drove Lupicinus drove Romanus, like the monastery brotherhood, away, didn't he?
Okay, so I think Saint Romanus. Let me look real quick.
Saint Romanus calls them back through prayer.
Yeah, so yes, that's actually interesting account. That's actually a very encouraging and interesting account. Okay, so they were brothers who had basically who were eating, kind of overeating, more or less. They weren't praying as they should. Okay, let's find that account, because it actually mentions what happens to them. Okay, I should have marked it out. I can't really see. Okay, here we go. Okay. It happened one day that he was visiting those of the brothers who, as we said, had assembled in the region of Alemannia. So that's St. Lupicinus. Okay?
You're right.
He arrived at midday where the brothers... So St. Lupicinus had his own monastery, and St. Romanus had their own monasteries. They had originally been hermits out in the... Oh, by the way, they had originally been hermits out in the forest. I think in the Auvergne region.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
and what happened is that they originally been hermits out there. They were praying. The demons manifested physically and were attacking and throwing rocks at them as they were praying on the ground. They got discouraged, so they left and they kind of were like, well, I guess we'll go back into town and maybe, I don't know, like live there. And they stopped at this old woman's house who kind of helped take care of them. Okay, like she gave them food, and they described to the old woman, "Look, we can't stay out in the wilderness. The demons are physically throwing rocks at us as we're praying." And the old woman
Scares them back into the forest.
yeah. And here's what she says, and I'll say it. I'll read it just real quick because I think it's actually. She says, "O men of God, you should have fought bravely against the wiles of the devil, and not feared the enmity of him who has so often been laid low, overcome by the friends of God. He is envious of sanctity, for he fears that the human race, whose fall he brought about by his perfidy, will rise again ennobled by its faith. And they, Saints Lupicinus and Romanus, touched to the heart, withdrew from the woman and said, Woe on us, for we have sinned against the Lord by abandoning our purpose. Behold, we are convinced of our cowardice by a woman. What will be the end of our life? What will the end of our life be if we do not return to those places from which we have been expelled by the shafts of the enemy? Then, armed by the sign of the cross, their sticks in hands, they returned to the desert. On their arrival, the treacherous demons began to renew their stone throwing, but they persisted in prayer, obtained God's favor, so that the temptation was removed, and they could persevere freely and unimpeded in the worship of their Lord. And then eventually other people began to find them, and monasteries grew up around them. All right? Okay, so here's the other account. So St. Lupicinus happened one day that he was visiting those of the brothers who, as we have said, had assembled in the region of Alemannia. He arrived at midday when the brothers were still in the fields and entered the building in which the food was being cooked for the meal. He saw there a great array of different dishes and a pile of fish, and he said to himself, It is not right that monks whose life is solitary should have some such unsuitable luxuries. And he ordered a great copper cauldron to be prepared. And when it had started to heat on the fire, he put in all the prepared dishes, fish, vegetable, and beans, and everything else prepared for the monks, and mixed them all together. And then he said, Now the monks can eat their fill of this stew, for they will not abandon themselves to pleasures which could turn them away from their divine calling. When the monks heard this, they were very discontented. 12 men discussed it together, and they left the monastery in a rage, and went out to wander through the wilderness in search of the pleasures of the world. St. Romanus learnt of this immediately, by means of a vision of divine mercy, for divine mercy did not want him to remain ignorant of what had happened. When Abbot Lupicinus returned to the monastery, Romanus said to him, If you left here just so that you could drive monks away, it would have been better if you had stayed behind. The abbot replied, Do not be angry over what has happened, dearest brother. Know that the threshing floor of the Lord has been purified, and that the wheat alone remains for placing in the granary. The chaff has been thrown away. And Romanus said, It would have been better if no brothers had departed. Tell me, I beg you, how many did leave? 12 men, replied the abbot, men vain and proud, in whom God does not dwell. And Romanus, weeping, said, I believe from what I know of divine mercy, the Lord will not separate them from his treasure, but will reunite them and gain those for whom he suffered. And having prayed for them, he obtained that they might return to the grace of Almighty God. And the Lord did indeed touch their hearts with remorse. And doing penance for their departure, they each assembled their own communities and founded their own monasteries, which persevere to this day in praising God. And Romanus continued in his simplicity and good works, visiting the sick and curing them by his prayers. So what's interesting is, they got upset that all the fancy dishes they prepared, St. Lupicinus had sort of, thrown into a big stew, and I guess they were upset.
Turned them into a big, messy thing, yeah.
Well, I mean, throwing fish and vegetables and bean into a pot with water is just going to make fish stew with vegetables. But unless they had some... But anyway... They did repent in the end, and they each went on to found 12 monasteries. So it has a sort of happy ending, you might say.
Yeah, there's kind of there's a hidden meaning to it.
Yes. So, and undoubtedly, as they were wandering in the wilderness, they probably thought to themselves, did we really get this upset? We left the monastery over the abbot, one of the abbots, throwing all our food into a stew.
Yeah,
Was that really a worthwhile case?
But there's stuff like this in so many of these lives that's really kind of amazing. Um, and so it's just I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing more volumes in the series. I do recommend this one, even though there is, of course, the one from the French. Reading it from the Latin, it does have there's some slight differences there, and it's worth it. Plus, it's part of a series, so you can just go to the next volume.
Yes, yes. So that's the basics of it. I mean, I could probably find how much time do we have left?
It's 8:28.
I'm sorry, it's a no. What? So we have we okay. So we're only doing 30 minutes. Okay, so
Yeah, we're kind of doing the 30 minutes.
Okay, and there are no and I'm assuming there are no questions or anything like that. Okay,
I can check. Let me see.
Okay.
Hold on. No, someone did notice that volume 44 is on Ireland. Yes, it is, Aaron, and there's going to be there's. I mean, we'll see how long this series goes, and we'll see what we're going to do with it. And, keep reading. Again, we'll be back on Sunday. We're going to do another clip tomorrow from the last Sunday's show, but this Sunday we're going to be coming in at 8:00, and so hopefully we'll see everyone there. And did you have anything you wanted
nope.
to?
I think it's important people read the lives of the saints, especially the works by St Gregory of Tours. Next week, we're going to be addressing another work of St Gregory of Tours.
Okay.
And so it will be important. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, thank you again for listening. For everyone who commented, wish, questions, comments, and we'll see you next week. And of course, we'll be here for Sunday. And have a great rest of your night. Vodica, benedicite.
Benedicite.